Yeah, greetings. This is John G. Sutton, and welcome to Tales from the Jails. This is number 48. I'm going to talk about drug smuggling. Yeah, drug smuggling, contraband, stuff like that. Taking stuff into inmates, basically, and how it works. Yeah. Well, of course, when I was there, it predated the idea of drones. But they used to have things like throwing stuff over the walls, and the patrols would either pick it up, and if the patrols didn't pick it up, then they had the cleaners that were going round, and they would pick it up and take it into the inmates. The security patrols would obviously place it with a security office. But let me tell you how it works, basically, from my point of view when I was at Wormwood Scrubs and Strangeways. Right. Well, when I was at the Scrubs, yeah, what the inmates would attempt to do, and listen, they try this with most staff, especially very junior staff, people who have just joined. They're absolutely ripe for picking by the very experienced criminals. And these criminals know what they're doing. It's not straightforward like you think. You go in there and these are just fellow human beings. I like to think that. They are. But they're also criminals. And a vast number of them are highly experienced operatives. And what they do is they get round the staff. Oh, you're a good officer. You're one of the good ones. All the rest are a bunch of bastards. I've nothing to do with them. But we'll talk to you because you're a nice man. And my sister's extremely sick. I need to be able to speak to my sister. How am I going to speak to my sister? And all this, that, and the other. Get them, smuggle them a letter. When I was there, it was smuggling letters out. Seriously. There was one Category A prisoner who was located on C2, and I was one of the officers in charge of C2 landing at Wormwood Scrubs, and he was serving, I think it was 16 years for armed robbery. And I was working in the censor's office for a day, and a letter came in for this quite a high-profile armed robber. I won't mention his name, but quite a high-profile armed robber. And it said, in the censor's office, you open all the letters and you give them a cursory glance, to make sure it doesn't say things like, yes, the truck will be outside the walls at 2 o'clock on Friday morning, climb over the wall and we'll be waiting for you. You know, you've got to check that the letters don't say things like that. Most of them don't, most of them are completely and utterly innocuous. But this guy, being an armed robber, was a Category A prisoner. He was also an escape risk, so he was called E-list, yeah, E for escape list. That meant that his prison uniform had a yellow stripe right down the legs and the jacket. So immediately you saw that, you knew that he was there was potential for this man to attempt to escape custody. Some do. None did while I was in charge of them. And not for the lack of some of them trying. So anyway, I opened this letter addressed to this particular armed robber, and it was from the House of Lords, yeah? Lord somebody or other had written to him. Absolutely wonderful to hear from you, dear boy. Words to that effect. I trust that they're taking good care of you there, and I will be delighted to see you again when I'm coming to visit you in the immediate future. And since if there's anything I can do, you let me know. Best wishes. Yours sincerely, Lord Such a Body. So, all right, he's got a letter in. Get his letter sheet out. Everyone's got a letter sheet. All the letters that go out are registered. All the letters that come in are registered. Except there was no letter going out to this particular load. There just wasn't. So somebody had smuggled a letter out. Somebody had done that. So I just said to the officer in charge of the census office, I won't be 5 minutes, I'm just going to see an inmate. So I went to see this inmate, opened his cell up, said, right, who's been smuggling your letters out? You're going to tell me, but I knew that he was, because at dinner times, the wing governor in charge, the governor ostensibly in charge of C Wing, had been unlocking this man at dinner time and taking him down to his office at the end of C Wing, at the entrance end of C Wing. Yeah. So I said to him, listen, I know somebody's smuggling your letters out. Who is it? He said, I can't really tell you. I said, you're either going to tell me, yeah, or you are going to tell the number one governor, because I'm going to put you on report for this. Because this is obviously having letters smuggled out. I've got the evidence, So he told me, he said, I'll tell you. He said, but you're not going to like this. I said, well, hit me with your rhythm stick, boy, Tell me. Which was fairly prescient because it predated Ian Drury and the Blockheads. Right, so this guy told me, he said, what happens is it's the wing governor. He said he unlocks me at dinner time and takes me down to his office. He said, and he takes my letters out and gives me whiskey and stuff like that. I said, what the hell would the governor want to do that for? He said, well, I service him, I said, really? Service him? What do you mean, service him? I'm being a little bit naive, I suppose. I was a young man. I had not walked down that particular path. And he said, no, what he does is, he said, he gets his kit off, bends over the desk, and I service him, I said, my God. I said, and you do this, and he smuggles out the letters? Oh, yeah, he smuggles out the letters and gives me whiskey. I said, all right. So I locked him back up, went down to the census office, and wrote a report, handwritten report, Took the evidence to the principal officer in charge of C Wing and handed it to him. He read this. He said, go and see the number one chief officer immediately. So the evidence, I went, number one chief officer, in charge of all the prison, all the disciplined staff, knocked on his door, come in, So I went in. He was a great big blustering fellow, a bit like, have you ever seen The Quiet Man? There's a character in there, it's played by Victor McLaglen. Yeah, very much like him, huge great bloke, big sweaty hands. I told him what I'd done, and he said, who has given you the authority to investigate governors and senior members of staff? I said, with all due respect, I said, I have got a warrant from the Queen. I hold the Queen's warrant as a prison officer. And as a prison officer, I have all the duties of a police constable whilst I'm on duty. I said, and when I find that the law is being broken, as I have done, and you can see before you, it's my duty to investigate. I said, and there is my report. And there is the evidence. Well, he didn't really want to know. He just banged on the table. Boom, boom. Get out of my office, get out. So I left him to it, I'd done my job. I'd reported it, You'd think, that something would happen and they'd call the police in, and get this governor arrested or whatever. Yes. About 3 days later, I was on C2 landing, and a couple of inmates came up to me and said, hey, Cub, what have you been up to? I said, what do you mean what I've been up to? I've been working on the landings, locking you buggers up, He said, no, the police are in. They're asking questions about you. I said, police are asking questions about me? They said, yeah, they're calling inmates down off the landing one at a time and asking them questions about you. what you've been doing, what you've been up to, and all this. It transpired that the chief officer had called in the local police to investigate me, yeah, for corruption, believing that I was the one that was. I tell you, you wouldn't piss on the bastards if they were on fire, yeah? Disgraceful. So, lots of incidents with inmates trying to get you to smuggle stuff in for them, but basically, if you knew what you were doing, you just said, yeah, you've got no chance, lad. Absolutely no chance. It isn't happening. Now piss off. Words to that effect. You know, perhaps a little bit more lapsing into the vernacular, if you know what I mean. But I mean, you wouldn't do it. A guy came into Wormwood Scrubs. He was an ex-warrant officer from the Royal Air Force. A high-ranking warrant officer, the highest-ranking warrant officer in the Royal Air Force. He'd met the Queen, he'd done this, that, and the other, and all sorts of stuff. And he was coming in there. Now, this guy was coming into the prison service, and he was going to fart miracles, this bastard. He was attached to me for a day, as I showed him round Sea Wing. He was a new officer, brand new, but a very experienced and very senior warrant officer from the Royal Air Force. So I said to him, listen, these people may seem all right, human beings, of course they are, we treat them properly, I do anyway, or try to. I said, but don't befriend them. I said, because there are members of these people, this group here of prisoners, who are extremely experienced criminals all their life. They come from criminal families. The parents have been here before them, the grandparents probably, and they're just following that. They're career criminals, and if they can, they will persuade you to smuggle stuff in. You must not get involved. I said, be very careful. He says to me, I'm a former most senior warrant officer in the Royal Air Force. I said, I know how to handle men. Oh, right. And he's going everywhere he went with me. He was making notes. All this, obviously he was going to shake the system up, this guy. Anyway, that was the last I saw of him after that day. And I heard about 6 weeks later that he'd been suspended and subsequently dismissed because when he'd been posted to his wing, which was D wing, which is the lifers wing, he'd been persuaded by the prisoners to start smuggling whiskey in and cigarettes. And not only was he doing that, he'd set up an account at the local bookie shop, and he was taking money out from they had money. They knew what they were doing, all right. And he was putting bets on for them at the bookies. Anyway, the poor chap, ex-warrant officer, sacked on the spot. The problem was they'd found the prison service so wanted this man that they'd provided him straight away with a prison quarter accommodation, because he came out of the RAF straight into the prison service, and of course being in the RAF he was in military accommodation, and straight out of the military accommodation into accommodation provided by the Home Office through the prison service, and he was turfed out of that. So he lost his home, he lost his job, he lost his reputation, and he was down the road. And that's what can happen if you allow yourself to be manipulated by the criminals. And believe me, they're doing 10 years, 20 years perhaps. They've got plenty of time to work on you, yeah? And if you're a prison officer, then you'll recognise the approaches. When I was at Strangeways, one particular inmate approached me. He said, I want this guy to be a cleaner with me, I want him to be in my cell, I said, oh, do you? So I said, why would I want to do that? I said, I'm in charge of the landing, I said, you're the cleaner. He said, listen, boss, he said, all you're going to do is go to this nightclub in Blackpool, mention my name. He said, much booze as you want, they'll give you a nice meal, sit down. Women, he said, there's women there, they've got strippers and all that. I said, really? I said, it does sound kind of an attractive option for a couple of nights out, you know. He said, well, I guarantee you that will happen. I think the club was, believe it or not, the 007 in Blackpool. I think the owner was Brian London, the boxer. And this guy who was the cleaner on, I think it was E3, I think it was, yeah. E3 landing at Strangeways. And he was the bouncer. He was a big fella, you know. Tell you his name. Who cares? Vincent Pridding. There you go. That was his name. You might see him. He's on one of these documentaries shouting about the roof's gonna come off Strangeways. You can see what a big, aggressive looking bastard he was. So anyway, I said to him, it doesn't sound like I could do this because people may find out, and if they do, I'll lose my job. He said, no, they won't find out. He said, there's loads of staff been and done it when they've done me favours. I said, get out of it. I said, seriously? He said, yeah. He says, and he named about 4 members of staff, quite senior members of staff as well. So I said, oh well, in that case I'll probably have a go and give it a go. I said, I'll sort that out this afternoon. So I went to see the chief officer, but on my way I stopped and spoke to the 4 officers that he'd named. I said, I'm just on my way to see the chief officer. I said, I'm putting in a report. I've just been offered in an inducement by a certain inmate to do favours for him, and he tells me that you've been receiving benefits from him by attending this nightclub in Blackpool. I said, so I'm going to have to mention your name. I said, but you've got about half an hour. It'll take me that long to write it out and go and see the chief. I said, so you've got about half an hour to think about this. I went, all 4 of them, you know, some of them was a principal officer, was a senior officer, you know. I don't care. I just got to do what you've got to do, what you've got to do. And I did it. They were absolutely jumping up and down. One of them was running around in a circle. You can't do this, you can't do this. I said, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I am going to do this immediately, but I'm giving you a chance to get your explanations together. So anyway, I wrote it all out, time, date, all the rest of it. This is true to the best of my knowledge and belief, signed it, took it into the chief officer, made a verbal report of course, and then gave him my written statement. He said, right Mr. Sutton, he said, that's it, out, back to your duties. Well, I've done what I had to do, you know. I reported it to the correct authorities. Later that afternoon, the inmate that had tried to bribe me was taken out of the prison and transferred. He was transferred from Strangeways to Kirkham, which is an open prison near Blackpool. I mean, he won the jackpot, yeah? I mean, don't forget, this was a guy who was in for grievous bodily harm and stuff like that, violence, who should never have been in an open prison because he was a dangerous man, you know? Seriously. That's what they did. Under the carpet. The other staff, the staff that I'd mentioned in my report, they just avoided me like the plague, you know, but nothing was done. I don't know. What next? Happy days. Tales from the jail.